Welcome to CivilNet. My guest is Geoffrey Robertson. He is a human rights lawyer and a UN war crimes judge joining me from London. Mr. Robertson, thank you for joining me.
A pleasure, Maria.
You recently published a book called An Inconvenient Genocide, Who Now Remembers the Armenians?
That's this book. It's not available yet in Armenia, but I hope it will be soon, indeed in Armenian.
I hope so too. You know, from our vantage point here in Yerevan, it's interesting to us to know what was it that inspired you to write this book?
Well, I'm not Armenian. I'm originally Australian, and I ended up in Britain like Bill Clinton at the same time as a Rhodes Scholar. I stayed and became what we call a Queen's Counsel and a judge and an independent figure to which the Armenian society and Britain came to back in 2009. They were puzzled by why the British government was stating that it wasn't recognizing the Armenian genocide because the evidence wasn't sufficiently unequivocal to mean there wasn't enough evidence to prove that it was genocide. And I had been the president of the UN's War Crimes Court in Sierra Leone dealing with these matters, and the Armenian Centre asked me whether the British government was correct in law, because genocide, whether something is genocide or not, is a question for judges, not for historians, who provide the evidence but don't know how to apply it because they're not judges. And it was a bit of a risk because I hadn't considered the question before, and I could well have decided that there wasn't enough evidence that the Turkish government was right. But I looked at the evidence with the mind without any influence on any side, and it struck me quite clearly, beyond reasonable doubt, that the evidence proved that what happened in 1915 to the Armenians, to over 1 million Armenians who were killed, either in massacres or in death marches, amounted to genocide, according to the 1948 definition in the Genocide Convention, and according to the World Court, which had just decided that Srebrenica, the killing of 7,000 Muslims, was genocide because they were killed because they were Muslims. In other words, they were killed because of their race or their religion. So I prepared an opinion, which was published, which proved that what happened to the Armenians in 1915 was described and was describable beyond any shadow of doubt as genocide.
Opinion back in 2009 that led to this new book that you have just published?
It did. It led to the British government, I'm pleased to say, changing its position. And as a result of considering my opinion and considering the interpretations of genocide that had come from the World Court and from the court in The Hague that was looking at the Rwandan and Srebrenica genocides, that it was wrong, and it withdrew its previous statements that there wasn't enough evidence. So that was a good thing, and in my book now, which I've just published, I go into the question more deeply. It's been an opportunity to lay out the basic evidence of genocidal intent of the Ottomans, the Young Turk government at the time, and to set out in more detail why, without a shadow of doubt, the events of 1915 were genocide, and to look at some other associated issues like parliamentary recognition of the genocide, like the question of genocide denial laws. In some countries in Europe, it's a crime to deny the Armenian genocide. In Turkey, it's a crime to affirm it, and to discuss reparations, what Turkey should do, ideally on the centenary of the genocide, which began on the 24th of April 1915 with the rounding up of the Armenian intelligentsia in Constantinople and later killing them. So I've been able to look at issues that arise from the recognition that what happened in 1915 was the worst of all crimes.
Certainly, your book is a compelling legal framework for that. And I was watching an interview that you gave, I believe, to ABC, excuse me, ABC Television in Australia. The host of the show was asking you a number of questions, and you said that you would find it appropriate that next year, because we will be commemorating the 100th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, and similarly the 100th anniversary of the landing of Gallipoli, or Anzac Day, as many people in Australia and New Zealand call it. And you said that on April 23rd, Turkey, as a gesture, should return Mount Ararat. Now, what do you think the reaction would be to that statement in Turkey? It's interesting to know that why you felt that as a symbolic gesture.
There should be. Turkey should make a symbolic gesture. It's no good for Turkey to continue to deny not only genocide, but any crime at all. I mean, the Turks say, oh, it was justified by military needs. But no kind of military necessity can ever justify genocide. And so that is wrong. There was at least, it has to accept, a crime against humanity committed by the Ottoman Empire in its treatment of the Armenians by law. By law, it forced them to march hundreds of miles across the burning sands when most of them died or died of typhus in the concentration camps. A crime of this magnitude has to be acknowledged, has to be apologized for, as Germany, of course, has apologized for its Holocaust. And so there has to be some meaningful recognition by Turkey that its predecessors, the Ottomans, committed this crime against humanity. There has to be some form of reparation. I think there were over 1,000 churches were expropriated. Some of them could be rebuilt and handed back to the Catholicos, and that would be one form of reparation. I know many Armenians think that they should get back the Armenian lands. That may be too difficult now that 100 years have passed. Just gesture, which would nonetheless should be welcome, that at least Mount Ararat, the mythical blue mountain that overshadows Yerevan, could be handed back. I thought that would be an appropriate gesture by Turkey, both recognizing a crime against humanity, giving back the mystical mountain, and some of the churches, I think, could lead to a future harmonious relationship between two, let us face it, important countries.
Right. Mr. Robertson, you know, there are so many questions I want to ask, and I know that we are pressed for time, but I want to ask you, in the international recognition of the Armenian genocide that the Armenian diaspora in Armenia has been lobbying for decades, the more governments, the more parliaments, the more presidents that recognize officially the reality, the existence, the historic truth of the Armenian genocide, do you think that leading up again to the centennial of the Armenian genocide, that this will be enough pressure on Turkey to acknowledge, to come to grips with its own share in the Armenian genocide?
I would hope so, but I wouldn't hold my breath with that hope, Maria. There is a great deal of genocide denialism that is entrenched, unfortunately, excited by some genocide deniers. But I do think that if Turkey's leaders have any real sense and real statesmanship, they will find a form of words that acknowledges that what happened in 1915 was not a tragedy, it was a crime, an international crime. Whether they're reluctant to use the G word, then they must at least admit it was a crime against humanity. And they should offer some symbolic reparation. Otherwise, they will not be admitted to the European Union. Otherwise, they will continue to be looked at disparagingly and compared with Germany, which has acknowledged its past, Rwanda, which is getting over its genocide, Bangladesh, which is finally bringing to a form of justice, although not a very satisfactory one, those who were involved in its genocide in 1971. Turkey will really be looked at as an unprogressive and to that extent morally backward country. So I would hope that that sense will be triggered by the centenary. I would hope that other countries will send official representatives to Yerevan in the lead up to the 24th of April, because other countries have looked at the facts, as I have had no compunction in calling a spade a spade or genocide a genocide.
Right. Well, Mr. Robertson, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule. Thank you for writing An Inconvenient Genocide, Who Now Remembers the Armenians, and for all the efforts that you have put into the international recognition of the Armenian Genocide. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Maria, for your time. And let me just say that I look forward to visiting Yerevan in the lead up to the genocide commemoration. And I hope that many others with more official representative capacity than I have will join me.
I certainly hope so, too. Thank you very much. I'd like to remind our viewers that my guest from London via Skype was international human rights lawyer Geoffrey Robertson. Stay with CivilNet.